Hi everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. I'm some guy who thinks he can cook, and today we'll be taking a look at one of my favorite recipes, mole. Now, if you're like me, growing up the mole you ate most likely came out of a glass jar like this. Today, I want to show you that making your own mole at home doesn't need to be frightening or difficult, and that with a few simple ingredients and some time, you too can make great homemade mole. Let's take a look at what we'll need. Mole's complex flavor comes from its admittedly complex ingredient list. Starting off with the chilies, we have 3 each: chiles Negro, mulato, and pasillas, as well as 2 guajillo chilies. For the spices, there's a tablespoon of clove, allspice, and black peppercorns, as well as about an inch-long stick of cinnamon. For herbs, a couple tablespoons of dried oregano, as well as 2 avocado leaves. We'll also need, for flavoring, about a 1/4 cup of pumpkin seeds, raisins, and sesame seeds. Additionally, we'll also need some tomatoes, about 1 onion, several cloves of garlic, a packet of chocolate, some cookies, and last but not least, a whole chicken. Now, you don't need the chicken. You could use chicken stock, but you need something to serve the mole on top of, so I'm thinking, why not just make dinner and stock all at once? Alright, now let's jump over to the stove and get started. The very first thing that we need to do is put our chicken on the stove in a pot of water, heavily salted, along with about a 1/4 onion and several cloves of garlic. Once this comes up to a boil, we'll reduce the heat to a low simmer and let it cook for about an hour to an hour and a half. This should give us enough time to work on the rest of the ingredients. On the next stove over, we'll need a few things for our next steps in the process. On the stove itself, we have a pan with about a 1/4 inch of oil at about medium heat. A pot behind us filled with hot water, and our chilies all split open and de-seeded. Essentially, what we want to do next is fry our chilies in the oil. In batches, of course, you want to give them space to really darken and develop some nice flavor. Now, you don't want to actually burn the chilies, but this is a good time to try and discover just how far you can actually take food. We really want these to be nice and dark and crisp. Once our chilies are done frying, we'll move them out of the oil and into the water where they'll soak as we prepare the rest of our ingredients. So, let's get started with the first batch. Next, we'll want to work on frying the rest of our ingredients. These are about a 1/4 of an onion, several cloves of garlic, 2 tomatoes, and about a dozen of our cookies. So we'll fry these in batches again until they're all nice and crispy, removing them and setting them aside for now. Next, in a heavy pan over medium heat, we'll want to toast our spices. That's going to be the allspice, the peppercorns, the clove, and the cinnamon stick. We'll get those toasted up pretty nicely, and then move them over to be ground. I've transferred our now toasted spices to this molcajete, where I'll grind them into a fine powder. Once ground, I'll transfer them to a bowl and set aside. Now you might be asking, couldn't you do this in a coffee grinder or a blender even? And the answer is maybe. But where's the fun in that? Back on the stove, it's time to toast our next 2 ingredients, the pumpkin seeds and the sesame seeds. Once these are nice and toasted, we'll transfer those to the molcajete again, give them the same treatment as the spices, mix those together, and then we'll be ready to move on to the final steps. While we're grinding everything up, we'll also want to be sure to go ahead and grind up our oregano and the avocado leaves as well. Once those are powdered, we'll add them to the rest of our spices and the nuts and move on to the next steps. Once we have all of our ingredients fried, toasted, and ground up, now we can actually begin preparing the sauce. So here in this pot, I've added all of our ingredients, all of our chilies, our spices, our herbs, the vegetables, the crackers, everything. Additionally, there's about a cup of the chili soaking water in here and several tablespoons of oil. Now that our chicken is finally done cooking, I also have a few cups of that beautiful chicken stock that we made. We don't want to add all of this at once. We still want the sauce to be rather thick, so I'll go ahead and start off by adding about a cup of this stock. Let's see, a little under a cup. From there, we want to blend everything up nice and smooth. You could use a blender, but I have a stick blender. I'll do it right here on the stove. And we want to add stock as needed if it's looking too thick. If it's looking too thin, we'll just boil the sauce off afterwards. But for now, let's get blending. After simmering the sauce for about half an hour and then passing it through a strainer, you should be left with a beautiful, dark, thick, rich consistency like this. This sauce is ready to serve. After all that work, it's finally time to sit down and eat. Here I've served the mole pretty simply, just over some chicken and rice, but of course the possibilities are endless. Now, was making this as easy as opening up a jar of this? Probably not. Was it worth it? Definitely. This is certainly not a weeknight dish, but with a little bit of attention and a little bit of time, mole is within anyone's reach. I hope you tried this recipe out, and I'll see you next time.